Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. I am Christina Joy, the events coordinator. Sankofa has been here since 1997, serving the Georgia Avenue Shaw community and directly across the street from the illustrious Howard University, HU. You know. Thank you for the vice in the house. Thank you. Tonight we have very special guests with us, and we're discussing a very important topic. We're discussing Black children in homeschool, and with the way our education system is looking, y'all, I mean, is there any other choice at this point? So tonight we have none other than Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman, a Black homeschool advocate, the executive director of the Hurston Wright Foundation, and a mama, of course. We also have Tracy Yorkie and Dr. Sherry Maida, and we will have a wonderful panel tonight on Black children in homeschool. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, So, just very thrilled to be here today with my sisters, my homeschooling sisters. I do want to give a shout out. I wear many hats, and so I'll be remiss if I don't say that today I'm wearing the hat as a representative of Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars, LLC. It was an organization, or it is an organization that I co-founded in 2020 with Dr. Cheryl Smith when we were in the process of writing this book, Homeschooling Black Children in the U.S., Theory, Practice, and Popular Culture. And this book you can purchase through Sankofa Books. It also is, you can learn more about it on my website, as well as the blackfamilyhomeschool.org website. And so Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars started in 2020. As you can recall, 2020 was a pivotal moment in history, because that is when our country went into what we call a global health pandemic, a COVID-19 quarantine. And I actually was defending my dissertation on March 13th, 2020. My dissertation was on the perceptions of preparedness that African-American dual-enrolled homeschool students had, their perceptions of preparedness for community college while being homeschooled. And so I created a model of indicators of preparedness based on the feedback from these young people. And I had to defend virtually on a Friday because Morgan State University's campus was closed because of the quarantine, which officially began that following Monday. And so it's so interesting because prior or during my research and even coming up with the idea, I'll be honest that my committee members and just in general, people weren't really like feeling this, like homeschool, dual enrollment. That really wasn't a conversation piece as it is now. And so once I started sharing, what I was studying, I actually got offered a book deal to publish my dissertation and chose to do this book, which is an anthology of voices, different homeschooling mothers, researchers, education researchers on homeschooling. And it kind of began to change because of COVID, where a lot of the essays are on homeschooling through COVID-19. And so I think it's necessary to talk about that because what we did with starting BFHES, Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars, we began offering annual teach-ins. And so we started an online community on Facebook and began having really an online symposium where parents who were deciding to homeschool, those who had been homeschooled for a little while before COVID, we were all coming together and sharing information. And this is how I met these wonderful women here, Tracy York and Sherry Mehta. We met virtually, even though we realized that we all live in Prince George's County, Maryland. And that's how it is. It's another story for another day, but that's actually how I met my partner who lived down the street from me, but we met on Black Planet. But that's a whole other conversation. But that's usually how it happens. And so you all joined my community. I don't know which one joined first, but two of really the most active and amazing members of the Black family homeschool educators and scholars community. So definitely needed to have you here and for you to share, because you began homeschooling really around the time that COVID-19 forced all of us to pivot, all right? So there are a couple of things that I want to do before we begin to have this conversation, which is to really define for folks who are watching, because our audience looks pretty much like our family members who are familiar with all of this. But I want to say that when we're talking about homeschooling, we're talking about the practice of curating your child's learning experience, that P through 12 educational journey. We're not talking about being within a traditional school setting, whether it's public, private, or charter. We're not talking about independent schools. And that's a lot of things. You see me, I'm the bouncer of our Facebook group, because there'll be people in there with independent schools, or I have a preschool program, and teachers and people who want to come and just take over the actual teaching of your children throughout the day. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the practice of curating that experience. So you may have an instructor who's teaching a subject, or your child is involved in a program, but this is really the act of you curating it, or for those who then begin to involve the children. So you're co-curating with your children, and for many, where the children is self-directed, where you are now a co-facilitator with them. And we'll talk about all of those things, but I did want to really state that that is what we mean when we are saying homeschooling. We're not talking about where the child still goes to this traditional school setting and then comes home and then you supplement that learning with your own. That is not what we are talking about today. So that was a lot of talking. So I encourage anyone to learn more about Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars at blackfamilyhomeschool.org, and you can join the group. But I want to ask our guests, I alluded that you began around 2020. If you can give us, so we can kick off our conversation, give us a little bit about that moment where you decided to begin homeschooling your young people.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is wonderful because just recently I was sharing with another group of women just about the homeschooling experience. And so I really got a chance to reflect on like when that moment really happened. But here locally, if you're familiar with the geography of PG, there's a park or a Lake Artemisia that has a walking trail. And it was one day kind of in that summer where I had already had my son, registered for the next semester. But we as a family were taking a walk in that park at about like a little bit before 10 a.m. And it hit me. I was listening to the birds. I was seeing the water. And it hit me like, I don't think I'm going back to my job. I realized like this opportunity to be walking with my family in the morning, enjoying this environment. I can't go back, right? And I was like, and because his tuition was tied to my job, I'm like, I don't go back. He is not going back because there's a discount, tied with that. But I started to realize, like, through this pandemic, we had rediscovered so many things. And one of it was our agency and freedom and the idea of what's essential and not essential. And I realized I don't want to keep feeding into the system. I worked as an educator in an independent school, had a leadership position, and in technology. So it was very key in this whole pandemic experience because I went to families' homes, helped them get connected to the online learning systems we had and all of this. And I saw the chaos behind the scenes. And the chaos existed before, but it was amplified and it hadn't gone away. And we were getting ready to go back into the system again with all of the sort of racial chaos going on as well, and no one had healed, but just about to get back into the cycle. And so I said, oh no, we out. We are not going to do this. Harriet Tubman was in my head, like we're not going to do this.
Tell us how old your son was at the time.
So at that time, he must have been 10. And so I left my position and got a remote position, and then started to join communities. Because I realized that this is not a journey I'm going to take alone. And that was really, how we became connected. And I think it was the first virtual conference.
Okay.
So I think that, of course, being an educator and designing learning experiences, I always was confident sort of in my ability to provide, resources and an experience for him. But that moment, it's just really distinct in my mind when I realized I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm about to kind of unconsciously force myself back into a process where I could choose this. This doesn't have to be one day. It could be every day of our experience. And we're learning right here, like, that's the plants, and you're gonna write, you know what I mean? Like we can, this is a learning experience, but it's also a communal family experience, and we feel free.
We're gonna come back to talking about resources and that mindset as being really 90% of, I just made that up. But I would say the majority of the pushback that folks feel, or the burden or challenge that a lot of homeschooling parents feel, is usually around that mindset and what you're describing as you having that aha moment. So we're going to hear from Cheryl to hear what made her decide to homeschool, and then we're going to start talking about resources and those kinds of things.
All right. Well, actually, I'm a firm believer that nothing is coincidental. So people are placed in your lives, situations, events kind of occur, and it all snowballs, and the puzzle pieces fall in place. Where we moved into our community about 10 years ago, there's a homeschooling family, a Black homeschooling family, right down the street from us. And my husband and I used to say, like, oh, wow, look at these kids out in the middle of the day riding their bikes and getting fresh air. And, oh, man, Vicky's kids look so happy. That's just, oh, okay. And we kept on going about our way. We met Khadijah before everything shut down in 2019 for Kwanzaa, the Kwanzaa Festival at the Prince George's African American Museum. And she was doing a workshop on drumming. We made the drums and decorated, and it was so fun. And there's another person who's kind of, oh, she homeschools. Nice to meet you. And literally a few months later, finding a therapist for one of my sons who's actually also a Black homeschooler. And there, when the decision came that, everything is shut down, what are we going to do about next school year? There were people that were already in place around us that we had not reached out to, that we had not sought out, but had actually landed right in our laps, who were encouraging us. Vicky down the street, Khadijah online, Keisha online. And we just felt that we could do it. I had been in education. I taught high school and college for years. I'd never taught elementary, but I felt confident in the community around us. And we had dipped our toes in homeschooling for some years earlier when my oldest son was in preschool, and we were in between preschools, and we said, oh, let's do mommy school. So when it came down to it, we said, the online isn't working. My son was not enjoying it. I could not imagine doing that for an entire school year and seeing that it wasn't a good fit and that we didn't have to accept it.
How old were they?
My oldest son was in kindergarten. So we were wrapping up our kindergarten year online, which was very hard for him. There were the friends that you couldn't talk to, that you really couldn't communicate with. That was the whole issue. And then my youngest was in preschool. And we thought about it just like you. We can make a different choice. If we have a choice, let's try it out. If it doesn't work, what have we lost? Right. There's only something to gain. And if it's nothing more than us working together as a family unit and learning together and having that year experience, then let's just do it. And we also had cheerleaders around us. Yeah. So it felt doable. And once we got through those first few months, we said, okay, what are we going to do? And we left that choice up to my oldest, who was then going into first grade. What do you want to do? do you want to go back to school? Do you want to do online? Do you want to do, we called it mommy school then. And he said, with all his chest out, I want to do mommy school. And I said, well, we're going to make it happen. And the young mommy school, and the youngest, who was 2 when we first did mommy school, he said, yeah, I want to do mommy school too. And seeing their faces light up, it's like, well, you can't let them down.
So both you and Tracy now have been homeschooling since 2020. So you're in your
Yes.
third or going on 4th year.
Yes, this is our 4th year.
Fantastic. So I guess I need to explain how I got into homeschooling. I just assume everybody knows me. Some of y'all don't know who I am. So you mentioned in 2019, when we met, I was a teaching artist and scholar in residence at Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center. And so I had an exhibit that had gone up at the Oxon Hill Library branch. I was just going to be living my best life, doing historical research, homeschooling, all these things, and then here comes COVID. I had been homeschooling my daughter at the time. I was homeschooling her for high school, and I had been homeschooling her off and on since 2008. So she was like your baby's age. We had moved from Baltimore to come back to the Prince George's County, Maryland area, and they had deemed that she was not old enough to begin public school, even though I had her in a private school in Baltimore. And so that transition before putting her back in school, I consider homeschooling, very similar to how you described. But it was really until 4th grade, she had tested into what they call talented and gifted. And she was in a school where my observations really looked at it, where talented and gifted meant more work. And so I share, when I'm in interviews, I share how this image that really stood out for me, she was playing cello at the time. And I remember this one image of her coming to the car with her cello, which was bigger than her, and just being so exhausted. And in less than 5 minutes, after getting into the car, she was out. She was tired. She was exhausted. And so shortly after observing, and feeling this, I got a call from her teacher who wanted to have a parent conference with me. And their concern was that she was finishing her work and she was finishing her tests. She tested well. But after she would finish her tests and everyone else was still doing their work, she would pull out her journal and start writing. And the teacher was really meeting with me to see if I could encourage her to put her head down instead of writing in her journal. And so I was at that moment that this teacher is asking me to be complicit in getting my child to stop writing in school instead of, so I was like, you can have a writing corner, and I go into professional development mode, and the whole time, like, this is not a fit for us. This is not going to work. And so I began homeschooling her for 5th and 6th grade. And then she decided in 6th grade that, like many young people her age who were born during the age of the internet, their professional aspirations is that she wanted to be a YouTuber. And so, so one of the things that we decided to help prepare for this career was learning public speaking, theater, all of those things. And so a local school was having auditions for performing arts school, and she wound up getting into the school. And when she did it, this was just part of what she decided was, because I wasn't taking her to New York at that time to audition for anything. So this was like the most local audition. So it wasn't like, once you get it, you have to go to this school. But I asked her, and she said she would like to go to the school. So she attended that school for 7th and 8th, and then asked could she be homeschooled for high school. And so that's always a win when they're asking, mommy school, come back to mommy school. So she was on this trajectory where she had asked me not to actually put her in any more homeschool co-ops or collectives. And so I had pitched to her the idea of taking college courses. She was adamant that she was not going to college. She was adamant. She was sick of school. And a lot of that really was developed when she was in traditional school settings. it's actually during the first teaching I had interviewed her, where she talked about her experience of feeling very adultist. And that's my word, adultist, but really speaking about authority over things like body agency, noticing how the girls were policed more when it came to what they wore. And she also she was wearing, she had asked me at 7, could she lock her hair? And then she decided when she was 13, she was going to comb her locks out. She wanted to wear her hair out. And through that transition, she was wearing head wraps. And the school was telling her that she couldn't wear head wraps. And so it was always this back and forth around just having body agency. And that fed into a lot of her want to homeschool again, is that she wanted to have some type of personal freedoms. And so she was like, okay, I'll do this college thing. And so she started taking college courses at 14. And she wound up graduating with her associates from our homeschool in 2021. And she's currently in her 3rd year at the University of San Francisco and will be graduating in May. And I say all of that to say is that somehow she changed along the way about college, but she knew she wasn't going to go to college here. So she planned that whole trajectory of she wanted to be in California. She got a full scholarship. And so I share that about my daughter to say that very early on, I knew that she was going to be a co-facilitator in this process. In that learning and her loving learning was the utmost thing that I wanted out of this experience for her, is because the 3 of us know. Now, I didn't read our bios, but you know, Sherry is a historian. We're classmates. We both are graduates of Morgan State University. And Tracy is in the midst of a doctoral program, but is very heavily engaged in a lot of conversations that Black people, we need to be having more conversations around technology, the metaverse, AI, those kinds of things. And so we are all, I'm not going to share y'all's business. I'll be 50 in December. You'll be 50 in August, okay. Are you both Leos or Virgos? Virgo. Leo, Virgo, and Sagittarius, okay? And so we are women of age and sophistication, but we are continuing, are learners, we're ongoing students. And that was a takeaway that I wanted my daughter to have. And so when we talk about homeschooling, and a lot of times, know that we have these advanced degrees and all of that, the first question that always seems to come up is that you have that degree, it's easy for you to homeschool. And this idea about curriculum and resources. And so one of the things that I say is that you are the curriculum, you are the resource. But I would love to hear from you all in terms of, as you were preparing for this practice, what were some of the things you had to push back against in your mind, and identify, how did you come to grips with this idea of resources and curriculum?
So that you are the curriculum, that's exactly what you wrote in the chat. And I was like, you are the curriculum. You are the curriculum, right? And I think, and that was because I had, decided that we would not return. And I started to, got into that immediate mode of like, how many things am I going to subscribe to and what curriculum might I get? Right. Or even going into an umbrella school, which is an option as a homeschooler that you can, register with another organization who sort of assumes that the evaluative piece. Yes. Right? And you were like, no, don't do any of that. Take the first year to really get to know your child in this new experience. So that was definitely divine advice there. And I really took it to heart and realized that why was I going to, I just took him out of the school environment. So why am I going to recreate the school environment at home? Because if I just pull those same materials, then that's exactly what I'm doing. Like, I'm not doing anything different. It's just that now I assume that level of authority. And one thing that I knew was going to be a through line was looking at decolonizing practices in whatever we were doing. Because we were
Break that down for people that they don't hear that word a lot when it comes to education. Decolonization practices. What does that mean?
So there's a very subject level when you think about colonial powers and how they've gone into other countries and what has been the result of that behavior, right? And I'm taking it back a little bit of looking at the nuance of the colonial relationship. And at the heart of it is about sort of power and abuse. And some of it, when you look into the educational context, it's a little bit how we become adultist and the way in which we exert our power over children, the body agency, what they should learn, what they want to learn versus what they're interested in learning, what they might even show talent in. Like, save that for a hobby. I need you to do math, right? And so I realized, like, if you are the curriculum, I have to get to know you. Right? And it's kind of thinking about, if you think about, there is a book that I highly recommend. It's by Akila Richards about raising free people. And I thought, what I really want is a child who understands that they will be learning all of their life. It never stops, and you can navigate different contexts. So I never want you to be afraid of a classroom, but I never want you to think that learning only exists in a textbook. I don't want you to think if you talk to somebody, somehow that's inferior to if you didn't read it in a book. And those are the underlining kind of colonial principles that come up in our learning. Don't trust your body. Trust the objective, scientific, sort of Western kind of perspective. You know, if it didn't come out of one of our universities, we're not even really concerned with it. If it wasn't published in really textual, if it's not published in a book, it's not real. So I'm like, we're gonna have a lot more experiences, but the first step was realizing, like, I'm gonna have to unlearn some of the things that I think is best practices.
And there's another term for that. What's the term that you know now in the homeschooling community?
The unschooling.
Unschooling,
Deschooling. Deschooling, yeah. Yeah, and at first someone mentioned it to me, I was like, look, I'm already homeschooling. I can't be unschooling and deschooling and all this other stuff. But I started to realize that, yeah, when you're bringing those same harmful practices in, then, you know, like, you don't want to work for a company, and then next thing you know, your company is just as bad as the company you came from, right? So I think that was those first steps, and then looking at those materials, and then realizing, like, I didn't need standard curriculum. We're cooking a dinner. There's math all over that. You know, and with my background in tech, I was like, pull out the phone, let's document it. Let's actually record this. There's other ways of documenting those experiences. And so we kind of gotten away from the traditional sort of resources, but realized a walk is an experience, okay? And pick up the leaves and bring these things home. So we started to make our own curricular materials, and then I could value, like, maybe I want to take a worksheet from this particular curriculum, but it's no longer allowing that curriculum to lead me. And you know, when you're leaning on the curriculum to give sort of the entire picture, whereas it's actually truly just a resource. And I have clear principles about what we're teaching and exploring and co-creating. So there are a lot of things, you know, my son is into baking, and so I was like, let me look at the science of food. I didn't really think about that before as much as let's just do chemistry. Right?
Yes.
I was a slightly slower learner. Just gonna throw that out there. What I took away, because I didn't get you're the curriculum. Khadijah didn't forward that one to me. So what I have been leaning heavily on was that I'm the curator of the curriculum. So I don't have to find something that's just boxed and prepared for me based on what my child's interests are. I can find those or put those resources together. But that first year, let me tell you, I was on that internet and I ordered this big old box curriculum. I was so excited. And then I opened it up. I said, whoa, that history's got to go. That is just not going to work for us. What is this? No, my gosh, no. The science, what is this? Like, no, none of this is what we want. And I started sending stuff back. And then got into, so what do you like? What is it that you're interested in? Which is totally different from me. My children are interested in coding and computers and tech, and I'm liberal arts, and none of that makes sense to me. But I'm the curator, so I don't have to understand it. I just have to provide it. So moving through that first year and thinking like, and also coming from not just as a public school teacher, but coming from a family of public school teachers. Like when you open up the book and it says it defines public school, I think my entire family's picture is usually there. We're all like waving, hi, this is us. My parents, my grandparents, my cousins, my aunts and uncles are all in education or social work in some way. So it had just, and I remember as a child helping my mom grade her papers and feeling so proud and excited about that. I can't wait to be a teacher. And then it dawning on me, I am my child's teacher and I can be the type of teacher that he needs, that they need. So tell me what you want me to find for you and I will find that. I will put that together. I will take you to those places. But it was, for me, a process of unlearning, of detaching myself, of letting go, like, really like prying my hands off of this concept of how school worked and what the purpose was, and then realizing the goal is to raise free children. The goal is to raise children who are change makers, who take the world into a different trajectory, and we can't do that doing the same thing.
But it's very hard. It sounds, as I'm listening to us speak, I know that for those listening who don't have the background that we have with educating other people's children, may feel that it's easier said than done. And what I would like to say, and just from listening to both of you all give your testimony, is that I feel that even with all of our school, we are actually more tethered to this idea of what schooling looks like. And so it would be remiss for me not to mention that I definitely had the box curriculum, had the audacity to buy, when we were doing 5th grade math, I bought Saxon Math. I had the audacity to buy for my Black child math called Saxon Math. And she was she could do it, and then this is boring. This is boring. And so I had the box curriculum. We had the room designated for homeschooling until that room was probably used once or twice before we were all over the house. We had favorite libraries, museums. We would do homework in the park. And so it is natural to still be in this mindset of what you recall, particularly for parents who their entire learning experience through P through 12 was in a traditional school setting. So to think outside of that paradigm, it really is going to take trial and error and encouragement. So joining communities, seeing how other people are doing their thing, picking from the different examples and giving it a try, being experimental, all of that is natural.
And also releasing yourself of guilt if you just don't want to use that thing. That thing that we bought, that I raved about, that I said was amazing, it is okay to say it's not amazing. Exactly. Or it's amazing maybe for someone else, but it's not working for us. And just the mindset it took, okay, Sherry, y'all aren't gonna finish that curriculum, but it's okay. Girl, it's okay, you got this. Just put it away. Sell it. Let it go. Let it go. Telling myself that. So yes, when you're coming in and you don't have that educational background, it may be more freeing because you're like, I'm just gonna roll with this. Yes. And we're gonna find some new ways to do this thing where literally it was, like a 12-step program. Yeah. Put the curriculum away, don't look at that anymore, and then log into the community. Tap into the community because that became the resource. Someone who's used something and said, this is great, or I found this, something I never would have found, and it may work, may not work, but linking up with the community and finding a different way.
Not yet.
Okay, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Again, really wonderful to see our homeschooling families in the audience. I can't even imagine anyone having ease getting here tonight. I was telling everyone that it's a lot going on in the city. We have a lot of things that are happening in the city, a lot of protests that are happening in, you know, the things that are happening in Palestine and Israel. And so that's my very sloppy transition to how we teach and how we engage our homeschoolers in this world that we live in. There are a significant amount of things that have happened since 2020. And we can just look recently, you know, between George Floyd, which illuminated this consistent history that we have in this country with state mandated violence from police, these things that are happening in Israel and Palestine, just on a global level. Tell me how your homeschooling practice, how you're making those connections to real world through your homeschooling practice, and some of the things that you didn't realize you were doing until reflecting, or the things that you were intentional with in including in your homeschooling practice, if that makes sense.
I think for us, in what is happening in terms of current events, when my kids have questions, it's easier for us to find resources that are less biased, where we can actually kind of talk about, even in a more creative way, using a timeline, working through our maps, connecting certain things that are happening to our own genealogy and making it seem a little more personal. I think that's the biggest thing, especially for my younger kids who are not understanding some of the larger pieces or the causes and effects. This is this thing that they see on the news, what's going on. Okay, well, we can pick up a picture book or a storybook and we can tell a story of people. We can find those things on the map and connect them. And I think that makes the biggest difference, that I am in charge of holding their hands and walking them through certain things that may not be addressed in a traditional school, or maybe addressed in a way that I feel is more harmful. And in order for us really my husband and I, to create, you know, these change agent children, we have to deal with facts and we have to deal with the true history, and not the propaganda. And it starts, you know, well, what did you think about that? You know, how would you react? Or what do you think a child your age feels about that's happening to them? And that makes it a little more personal. For us, it's using books and stories, history, music, genealogy to make those things that seem so far away, and how we can easily detach ourselves or feel disconnected from, and to actually make it more real, make it something that is more personal.
I think what I would add to that is addressing events in real time.
Yes.
So covering the war in Ukraine for a week is not enough, right? So when that began last semester or last school year for us and for my son to realize it is still ongoing. You know, in the curriculum, it's positioned and covered, and it feels like it's ended. And I think what happens in the homeschooling practice is we keep revisiting it. We've taken trips to Williamsburg to talk about the Jamestown settlement, and we've gone now every year, because that learning becomes deeper as he grows as a learner. Then he starts to make the connections, and this conflict, understanding that there's a conflict here and now there's another conflict here, and really dealing with it, I think, emotionally in the way that it needs to be dealt with.
Yes.
So he told me it's difficult for me to look at this. I'm not going to force you to look at it, But the question is, what is difficult? He's like, people are dying.
Yeah.
So that realization, so one thing in our health curriculum, we talked about the stages of grief. We didn't talk about that in middle school.
No.
It's just you feel sad. But to understand that people feel sad and they feel angry, then they go into a state of denial, but there's a process of that. So even as you are watching it, and even more particular when we think about issues of police brutality,
Yes.
and you recognize, like, I think I identify with the person that is being harmed.
Right.
These are very heavy ideals that I found, particularly when we were in an independent school environment that people would consider in some ways to be more progressive. It was almost like at 9, you expect my child to understand all of racism. And as an adult, I don't fully understand all. So, and what are you actually doing to that child at 9 years old when you bring all of these realizations?
Or
They are
sometimes not
developing.
addressing it at all. Sometimes ignoring the elephant in the room and not addressing it at all causes harm too. And you're like, well, there is a way to talk about it where our children are valued and their opinions and their space is valued.
And when you
Yeah.
understand these really heavy issues, it means that wars don't happen overnight. They're not ended with triumphs and flags being put down. You get to see all of these images. So I feel like, we've been learning, looking at early U.S. Indigenous history every year. It's not just your 9th grade year. It's not just your 5th grade year. We keep revisiting topics and going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I have the space to address it, but also to provide the emotional support so that you understand what these issues are, what this means. A war isn't the end of the chapter.
So I will say, because you asked the question, what does this do? So my parents were, so my name is Khadijah Zakia Ali-Coleman. So in case those who are not aware, or I was born in the 70s, so I am a product of 2 people who decided to join the Nation of Islam in the 70s and to name their daughter a free name. To my father's birth name was James Coleman. He gave himself the name Baraka Ali, and so my last name Ali-Coleman is actually derived from him. 2 names together. It's now a married name, and I say that because it's important to share that I've attended independent school. Nation House Watoto Shule here in Washington, D.C. For a while, my mother was a teacher there. My mother would have me reading Chancellor Williams as a child while she's doing my hair. So I learned all of the countries in Africa. I was very aware, viscerally aware about racism, about this positioning that we have in this country as Black people, where it has never been one of equity. And so that was foundational, so that when I did go to public schools and started to engage in these spaces, and with my name, which the teachers every teacher I've had has tried to rename me something so they do not have to say Khadijah, can't pronounce it. And so starting early on to really, my name is Khadijah, it's very easy, you can say it, let's say it together, Khadijah. But also being aware that there really weren't spaces to have discourse around these things that I grew up learning. So a lot of it is me in environments wondering, when are we gonna talk about what's happening? Why don't we talk about what's happening? And where we are right now is really interesting, because as people are feeling more comfortable to say things aloud, such as Free Palestine, and to be aware of what has been happening in that area of the country for more than 40 years now, it's now, oh, did you know that there's stuff happening in Congo? Oh, do you realize? And so this awakening that's happened. But I will tell you that my struggle when I was homeschooling was kind of trying to figure out that entry point, because my daughter had a very different early experience than I did, because she did not begin at an independent school. She had me as a parent, so there were certain things that we're just going to talk about in the house, but her relationship to the world was because I will be real that some things as a child for me was introduced so early without the opportunity to process with people around me. So what kind of environment am I going to create where we are processing and we're talking through, and it's not just like white people racist, you know, that's how they are. But breaking down a conversation about systems and processes and things like that. And one of the things that we didn't have was social media. So that was a constant having to figure out and have conversations to even know what is she learning or what conversations are she privy to through social media that I'm not even aware, that I have not had the control or the awareness of to be able to filter out. That's an excellent word, yeah. So all of that was part of, so from 2008 off and on to 2021, those are the things that really became a challenge for me, is to, you know, because technology kind of expanded before, and this is, our children don't know what life is like without technology. And so we now have to create a homeschooling practice with tools that weren't in existence when we were being schooled. So having to, it's a total paradigm shift. And, you know, even when we talk about some of the failings of our public school system now, I believe that teachers are having those same issues, you know, teaching to include these things, you know, teaching children for the future when this is a future, and there are tools that are now present that you didn't even grow up using. So you teaching people who actually know how to use these tools better than you. And so I will say that during my homeschooling practice, a lot of falling back was necessary, and having to be taught, having to follow, which is like, what? And from that, my daughter really became interested in plants. Definitely, I call her now a tastemaker. She's aware of things in technology and things that she brings things to the attention of her dad and I that we wouldn't know without her. But that is what homeschooling can be. So I do want to say, what time are we? So we have about 15 minutes left. I do want to get from you all to share with our audience when it comes to getting started homeschooling. I'm sure many people have asked you at this point, I want to homeschool. What's the best way to start? What is the advice that you give to people for them to get started on their homeschool practice?
To start, one of those things is all that anxiety that you're building up. You just have to start where you are. And some days are messy. So I think there's that idea, and I think, you know, maybe during the pandemic, when people had an opportunity to work with their own children, we were like, okay, now do you understand what we're saying? Because when you sent your child to school and we told you that there were these behaviors and you didn't see them, now that you were with them all day. Because I know there were parents who were like, we got to get this school back up and running, right? So some of it is, you know, it's not great every day. It's not perfect. Your child's not, you know, skipping down the steps and I'm ready to learn today, right? But there are magical.
Why didn't you all tell me that initially? Why didn't no one tell me that?
I mean, and I've seen kind of in our community posts of like, my child isn't feeling this and I'm getting discouraged, or even I have family members who are saying things. Yes. And so, yes, it's not always easy, but there are these tremendous moments that you're just like, this is why I do this, when there is that aha moment. So I think the first thing is just to get started and start off really basic. There are 3 things we're gonna get done today. You know, because you try to recreate that school schedule at home. So you're gonna wake up between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Yes. And then we're gonna have breakfast between. And then when he woke up at 11, I was like, we're already behind. What are you doing, right? So it's one of those things like you have have to start off really basic. Commit to start.
Yep.
And then start to build and realize I was like, we're gonna, one year, I was like, we're gonna kick it off with a trip going to Disneyland, right? And I realized because I can start off any way I want to.
Yep.
You really have to unlearn that practice. So don't be afraid to start small and then start to build and iterate on your practice. And then, outside of whatever state evaluation, know what is working for you. Keep your own journal of today was a good day, why? What did I hear my child say that I never heard my child say before? In the, homeschooling or unschooling community I'm a part of now, there are a couple of questions that we keep asking ourselves. But one of it is, who does your learner never get to be? And who do you never get to be?
Wow.
Right?
I like that.
And
we
so
share that in the group. That's excellent.
Yeah, so this is the GNI school community, but these are some of those grounding, decolonizing questions.
Yes.
Who don't you get to be? And so one of the things that they do with students in their community is ask, who did you get to be today? And they say, oh, I got to be a coder. I got to be a designer. I got to be a helper. So those are one of the things, but also for us as people, curating this experience, who did I get to be today? Yes. Well, I got to be a listener.
Right.
Because, I got to be a supporter. Right? Your role is changing. So every day if you're waking up wanting to be the teacher, wanting to be the one in control, no, that's not going to happen every day. There are going to be days where they are absolutely in control and you need to be following them and understanding. And then those days when they can't, won't, or need your support, then you can help. You can lead that experience. But don't assume that monotony. So start small, iterate on your experiences, and keep your own personal journal of how it's going. You're going to surprise yourself. You'll see that it's getting better.
Fantastic. Sherry, can I ask you to share a little bit about what she started talking about, which is that process? So there is a formal process that regardless of where you live, you have to, there's some protocols, some policies that you have to. So tell us about you getting started knowing the policy involved with being able to formally homeschool.
So that is the first big step that you can almost forget about when you start thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get curriculum. This is gonna be so great, I'm gonna paint the classroom. It's like, oh wow, nobody knows I'm doing this. So one of the first things is really going to your, we went to our county. The website for our school system, and just look up homeschooling. It's hard to find sometimes, it might be tucked away somewhere, but you look that up and it'll actually tell you what the process is. Alerting them, letting them know that you're withdrawing, what you need to do to stay compliant, figuring out if you're going to join an umbrella, if you're going to have the school system do your review. What does that look like? Who do you go to? So I literally just looked online. We're in Prince George's County in Maryland. I went to PG and then started to figure out, okay, homeschooling. Who do I need to notify? What do I need to do during this school year? And then linking up with other people. There were some Facebook pages specific to homeschoolers in our county, and I joined those. That's a great way to check your email if it's time to sign up for the review, which if you're in PG County, the email came out. So it's time to sign up for the review. So that's the first thing, knowing what the law is, what you're supposed to do so that you can keep doing this thing that you committed yourself to doing.
Right, because in our county, we have to do a portfolio quarterly.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and you don't want to miss that portfolio, and you want to know exactly what's supposed to be in the portfolio and how it should be arranged for the day of the review. And once you have that down, then okay, what's my next step, which is knowing your child and really listening to your child. Okay, so what is it? I know that we need to do math and we need to do science, but how can we do it in a way that best works for you? That was another thing, kind of tapping into my child, and then connecting with community. I often tell people who are interested in homeschooling, it's not a journey that should be done in isolation. This is really the time to have community. Not just for your children, but also for yourself. I may have had a rough day and I want to ask someone to help me get through that, or I need advice, or what is it that you're using that's working, or can we swap? Can I see that to see if I want to dump some money into that. Those are the things that are really, really important. And on those days when nothing is working, there are those people to say, tomorrow's another day.
I love that. Tell the folks, as we start to wind down, I want folks to know that you are an educator. You do teach other homeschoolers.
Yes.
And on OutSchool. So if you can just give that information to folks who may want to sign up for one of your classes, how can they reach you?
Yes, definitely crazy, because I was teaching homeschoolers before I started homeschooling my own kids. But you can find me on OutSchool Sherry, Meta, or you can check out my website, www.freedomwriters.org, www.freedomwriters.org.
Excellent classes. My daughter took one before she graduated from our homeschool. She was one of your students, and she loved your class. Which is, I was eavesdropping to you two talking. I didn't realize that your class on the letters from Black men from the Civil War was actually was it Civil War?
Yes.
Because your face kind of changed, like I got it. But that was part of your dissertation work, your research while you were in studying history.
Yeah, so I offer workshops on the lives and letters of African American men who served in the Civil War and the United States Colored Troops. And we look at that from not only an historical perspective, but from a literary perspective. And it's wonderful to be able to incorporate our family history into something that I teach and offer other students.
That's fantastic. Tracy, can you tell us about the Genius School and how folks can reach you?
Sure. So after joining the community, I'm the director in the Genius School. And so we have different campuses. There are campuses in Uganda, San Francisco, Atlanta, and on the metaverse. So I'm a director in the metaverse. So students meet in the metaverse where they design corporations and meet, but I also design, and my research is focused on creating spaces in the metaverse for Black and brown children. So this involves coding, avatar development, generative AI, and these are the topics that I used to teach when I was in sort of face-to-face regular school. So I'm looking at offering more of those opportunities. So, I'll share this. This was really nice. Tyson, I was so excited. His savings goal was buying the MetaQuest 3. So that took a year for him to develop, save enough money to buy that MetaQuest. And it was such an interesting experience. He and I looking at the announcement of the MetaQuest together, and then he wrote a paper about critiquing the speech, the presentation, and comparing it to the, Apple Vision Pro, right? And he's never been like a really techie child, but that experience now of not just using these technologies, but understanding how they work and realizing that we are creating them.
I love that. But can I first just say his face? They sick of us. So we as mothers, we just so excited. We just love this whole homeschooling journey. Our kids be like, you really need to chill out. You need to just simmer down. His face is like, yeah, do all that. Can you tell all my business? I love it. But I feel you, Mom, because I put my child's face on the cover of a book. But I at least have the decency to do it when she's younger. She does, she looks a little like this now. But I did want to say that, did you give your website?
thegeniusschool.org.
Okay. Because I want folks to reach out to both of you. And I did want to close with letting folks know that I did not convene a virtual teach-in with Black family homeschool educators and scholars this year because I was tired and I needed a break. Yeah. And so I had done 3 before, so I needed a break, but we will be returning in January. Saturday, January 20th is going to be one day. It's a little cold down from past years. It's been multiple days, but we're going to have a one day. I'm hoping, I'm putting y'all on the spot because I'll be reaching out to the 2 of you. But it's going to be virtual, and we have a second book. I've put a call out for folks who want to write a chapter. I hope that you all will consider writing a chapter. And that book will be on homeschooling on a college pathway. And I am actually working on a book in tandem on homeschooling, happy, free, and liberated kids, and drawing from some of the things that I've learned on my pathway as a homeschooling mother. And so learn more about Black family homeschool educators and scholars at blackfamilyhomeschool.org. Give it up for our guests. Yay! And we're out. Thank you again, Sankofa Books, for hosting us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap.